What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. As promised, this weekend we are kicking power rankings back off, so gonna run through that really quickly here. It's about 12:30 on Saturday morning at the time of recording this. I wanted to wait until the 3 Friday games were done to get this out, and then obviously beat out the slew of creators that do it over the weekend. So, gonna go through 32 to 1 as usual, the same as I used to do them on the good old PowerPoint slide here. If it hasn't failed me yet, it's not gonna fail me now, right? So. Number 32, I could have gone the easy answer and gone San Jose here, but I'm actually going to go with Chicago. And if I'm being completely honest, this is more of a vibes thing than anything else. Like San Jose, there's at least good energy in that room. I feel like Chicago, it just feels so bad right now. 2-6-2 in their last 10, so they are at number 32 for me. Number 31, though, is the San Jose Sharks. They are 1-6-3 in their last 10, so actually a worse record than Chicago. But again, at least the energy in this room is good. The kids are actually playing pretty well. That top line for them is clicking pretty strongly, I think. Obviously it's not going to be enough to keep up with the rest of the league, regardless of how good Celebrini, Eklund, Will Smith get. But 31 for the Sharks for now. At number 30, it's going to be Nashville. They're 3-7 in their last 10. Just obviously, I haven't done a power ranking this year, so there's no real movement. This is going to be my baseline, and we will go from here. So, Nashville at 30. Luke Shen said it himself. This team just cannot score. That's absolutely been the case for them all season. 3-7-0 in their last 10. There's really not too much to dive into for these guys. At number 29, a relatively similar team here in the surprise. We'll go both. Screw it. Whatever. Seattle Kraken at number 29. Similar problems. Going to be very interested to see what pieces they sell off before the deadline here next Friday. This team for a while was kind of on the bubble in the playoffs. At this point, I don't think they're going to make it unless they go on some kind of miracle St. Louis Blues-esque run just to get into the playoffs. So, that's where we have the Kraken at 29. And then 28, Pittsburgh. 4-5-1 in their last 10, but they just have not been able to keep the puck out of their net. They won their most recent game against Philadelphia, but it took Nedeljkovic being pulled and him showing and voicing a lot of frustration with the team, and I'm assuming the coaching staff, for them to kind of get their asses in gear and get that game going in their direction. So that's the first win the Penguins have seen in at least 3 games prior to that one, and the games that they're winning are still not all that pretty. So despite their most recent game being win, the Penguins are at 28 for me. Number 27, staying in the Metro Division, the New York Islanders. This team's kind of just been floating around all year, man. It's been, I have to imagine, one of the more disappointing seasons for Islanders fans in recent history, just because they didn't really go out and do a lot in the offseason. They've dealt with a lot of injuries so far this season. Sorokin's been better, but still not quite at the level we expect Sorokin to be at. And then, of course, Varlamov missed a lot of time this year. So, just all in all, a pretty disappointing season so far for the Islanders. I'm going to happily put them at number 27. Number 26, I have Philly. They're 4-4-2 in their last 10. They're playing competitive games, but kind of just in this standstill point right now. They're not going to be most likely pushing for a playoff spot like they were last season. Some of their players have had pretty good years. Other players have struggled a lot. The goaltending, as we all know, has been really rough this year. So we'll see what moves they make at the trade deadline. Scott Laughton, of course, is a name that's been floating around for a lot of teams. He'd be a really good asset on pretty much all other NHL teams, but we'll see where he ends up and if there's any other pieces moving to or from Philadelphia come next Friday. 25, rounding out my bottom row, is Buffalo. They did lose their most recent game, but prior to that, I think they were on a 4 or 5 game win streak. So, by and large, playing a bit better. They have a lot of ground to cover if they want to get back involved in this playoff race, and I just don't quite see that happening. Another team that could be interesting to watch at the trade deadline. They have a lot of pieces that have been there long enough to probably be pretty unhappy there. And Kevin Adams, has got his hands more than full trying to figure out what to do with this team and what's the best course of action long term for them. So it'll be an interesting next week and an interesting offseason for Buffalo. And again, they're playing better right now. I just don't think they're going to have what it takes to get into the playoffs. Number 24, this team, similar situation, but just generally has been much better, and the vibes are much better. And that's the Anaheim Ducks. The one big piece for them, I guess 2 pieces for them that we could see in the offseason, the trade deadline, Trevor Zegras and John Gibson. We'll see if either of those 2 names move. But as a team, they have been really, really good as of late again. 7-2-1, both to Stahl and Gibson, playing quite well. The offense at a much better rate than it has been really for a lot of the last handful of years for this team, which is, one of their biggest, if not their biggest problem. And their young decor has really started to round out the season. And I think, much like the San Jose Sharks, just a bit ahead of where they're at, have a really bright future ahead of them. And I think we're seeing kind of bits and pieces of that throughout this year. At 23, this is a wild power ranking to make, by the way, relative to what I had it at the end of last year. Making this was such a weird exercise, seeing how much some of these teams moved. And this team doesn't move a ton from where I had them last season, but Montreal at 23, they've had kind of an up and down year so far. They have streaks where they look pretty good. They have other streaks where they look not so great. Right now, they're kind of in the middle. Again, they're 4-6-0 in their last 10. Goaltending kind of up and down for them. I really wish they would play Jakub Dobeš in more games. I know Montembeault as of late has been pretty solid, but I wouldn't mind seeing more of that kid to see, what he's got for the Canadiens. But all in all, kind of where we expected them to be this season. You wanted a little bit more improvement. You wanted to see what Laine could bring. We're kind of seeing both of those. And yeah, they beat up on the Sharks. Not beat up on the Sharks. They beat the Sharks in overtime the other night. A great goal by Cole Caulfield. And yeah, we're going to put them at 23. 22, a team I would not have expected to be this low this season. The Boston Bruins. They are 3-5-2 in their last 10. The goaltending has been an issue. They blow that game to the Leafs the other night in what was really kind of a do-or-die game for them. I know there's still 25 or so games left in the season, but against a division rival, a game the Bruins are getting up for, you just can't throw that game away. And it kind of just is like a perfect picture of how the Bruins have been all season. Like they have the ability there. Obviously, the depth isn't what it once was, and the same can be said for their goaltending depth, but just all in all, struggles all over the ice for the Bruins. We'll see if Marchand moves. There's a ton of rumors about whether or not he stays put. I can't see him getting traded, at least not at the deadline, but who knows? That'll be an interesting piece to follow here and would be probably the beginning of the unwinding for the Bruins if that does take place. But for now, we have them at 22. We'll see what happens next week. 21, and this is a team that if I had done this a week earlier, probably would have been at least a little bit higher. That's the Ottawa Senators. They've lost 5 games in a row. They are 5-5 in their last 10, but again, each of the last 5 games have been losses. Linus Ullmark just has not quite looked right since coming back. I think he's gotten pulled in 2 of his starts since coming back. And again, this team that was just looking pretty good is starting to all of a sudden get plagued by injuries. No Kachuk, no Norris. And again, Ullmark coming off the injury just hasn't looked quite right. So we'll see if they can kind of right the ship here and make a push for the playoffs. In the East, it's going to be a really interesting race, and there's a lot of these kind of mushy middle teams that are going to be involved, but the Sens definitely have to pick it back up if they want to find themselves in that mix. Number 20, heading back out west, we have the St. Louis Blues. This team technically could still make a run. They are 5-3-2 in their last 10. I just don't know if they're going to have what it takes. I mean, even frankly, to keep up with a team like Utah, who I actually really like their odds of sneaking in if they continue to play the way they are. And of course, if they can stay healthy, right? That's a big issue that they've kind of struggled with this season. But for the Blues, by no means out of it. I just don't love what they have on paper. And yeah, as of late, they're doing enough to kind of skate by, stay involved, but we'll see what they can do at the deadline. I don't expect them to be buyers, but you never really know with this team. At number 19, we have the New York Rangers. The Rangers, 5-5 in their last 10 as well. They struggled for a long stretch and just have not fully climbed back out of it to get themselves into kind of the top 2 rows of playoff teams. I would be surprised to see them completely miss this year, but they definitely still have some ground to make up in order to find themselves back in a spot safely. And again, the way the East is right now, there's like 5 or 6 teams fighting for those last 2 spots. So they are by no means clear of just being able to coast in. They're going to have to work their way at it. They're going to have to climb past some teams and some teams just ahead of them on this list that are actually playing pretty well right now. So for now, the Rangers at number 19. Number 18, bouncing back out west, we have the Calgary Flames. They're 4-5-1 in their last 10, but they've been playing pretty well from the eye test, I think. In what I've watched of them, obviously they play a lot of 10 o'clock games, so I can't watch a ton of them, but I've been trying to watch more of them just to kind of catch more of Dustin Wolf's game this year. And I like what I've seen from this team. I mean, again, they were not really expected to be in the mix here, so the fact that they're up here at all is great. It makes Craig Conroy's job probably more difficult than he expected because it means he has some harder decisions to make, but I think you can still make the case that this year's a success for the Flames, obviously. Some guys stepping above the roles they probably should be playing, which is always good. Some young guys involved in that as well. So good stuff from the Flames all around. Again, kind of coasting at the moment. I would be surprised to see them make the playoffs with the pieces they have, but they're definitely still in the mix out west. So for now, we have them at 18. And then at number 17, a team in a very similar spot is the Utah Hockey Club. Again, as I mentioned earlier, they're finally getting fully healthy. 6-3-1 in their last 10. We'll see if they can start to put the puck in the back of the net. That's been their biggest problem really all year. Their defensive game is actually surprisingly strong, and they just got Sean Durzi back too, so that's a big add for them. Not really too much else to say for Utah. I would love to see them make it in their inaugural season. I think that'd be a lot of fun, and I think that place would be rocking in the playoffs. So we'll see if they can bump up into these next two rows in the coming weeks. Number 16, the first spot in the second row, is the Vancouver Canucks. And this team, I mean, I kind of talked about this in the offseason a little bit. I think this team overperformed last year. And then this year, obviously, they've had no luck really whatsoever. Pettersson has been miserable, to put it lightly. Obviously, the JT Miller situation, he gets shipped out. Thatcher Demko cannot stay healthy. Artur Shilov's really hasn't been a factor. Kevin Lankinen's been a bright spot for sure, and really has kept their season alive. He's been fantastic this year, but this team just cannot get themselves out of bad luck. If they have any luck at all, it's bad luck, right? So we'll see if the Canucks can kind of hang on. They are still in a wild card spot, I believe, as of recording this. But yeah, they're going to have to make some improvements at the deadline if they want to truly contend. And they're going to have to fight their way in because the likes of Utah and Calgary are definitely not going to go out without swinging. Number 15, and these are probably the two most exciting teams in the East right now. It was hard to figure out kind of who I wanted to put where. I am putting Columbus at 15 despite the fact that they just beat Detroit, and we have a rematch of that again today by the time you guys are watching this in the Stadium Series at the Shoe. And, of course, at 14, I'll just pop it up here, the Red Wings. These two teams, I think, are tied at 64 points for the wild card one spot in the East. They are 6-3-1 and 7-2-1 in their last 10, respectively. Both teams, I mean, Columbus especially, getting more offense than they really anticipated. The Red Wings have kind of always known that they have this offensive firepower in a lot of their guys, but it really started clicking for guys like Raymond, Edvinsson, Larkin's having a pretty solid year. I mean, Patrick Kane, when he's healthy, has actually looked pretty good, especially in overtime, which isn't really a surprise. But, they have a lot of pieces that are just clicking pretty well. I mean, we're at the point in the year I would be more surprised if at least one of these two teams didn't make the playoffs than I would be if they did. I'd be pretty surprised if they both did. I think Columbus especially is still not quite built for it, but who knows? If they win this Stadium Series game on Saturday, they go 2 points up on the Red Wings, and I think they would then be 4 points up on the Rangers, the Bruins, and the Senators. So who knows? That's a very, very big game today on Saturday. It'll be a fun one. And yeah, Columbus at 15, Detroit at 14. Number 13, the Edmonton Oilers, 3-6-1 in their last 10. They just have not looked right since the returning from the Four Nations break. McDavid especially looks pretty tired. The goaltending has been an issue kind of all season, but especially lately. Leon Draisaitl looks great, but aside from that, definitely some issues just like with them gelling and them playing as a unit, which has kind of always been the deal for them. I mean, McDavid and Draisaitl have carried this team for a long time, but right now especially, they just don't look like they're working in symmetry, if that makes any sense. So yeah, it's definitely showing on their records. We'll see if they can find something in the deadline that maybe helps them. Hopefully they can find a way to get McDavid some rest, get him back into form. This team will still make the playoffs. I'm not overly concerned about that, but just a matter of the form that they go into the playoffs with. Number 12, excuse me if I'm starting to lose my voice here, team with a kind of similar situation as the New Jersey Devils. I think Jack Hughes has not quite looked right since the break. He didn't look right in the Four Nations tournament to begin with. The Devils were, worried about their defense and their goaltending coming into the year. That's kind of been solved. I mean, Allen and Markstrom have been pretty good. The defense has been better than it was last year, still could be better. But now the scoring's kind of drying up, right? So we'll see if they can right that ship. Markstrom, I think, should be back within the next week or two, if I remember the timeline of that injury correctly. Hopefully that's the case because it looked like Jake Allen got kind of tweaked in the last game he played, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, the Devils kind of just coasting right now. I think they need to pick it up if they want to make a deep run in the playoffs, which is the expectation for this team at this point. Right now just kind of coasting through 5-5 in their last 10, so they get the 12th spot. Number 11, similar situation again, less expectation for this team in Minnesota. At least coming into the year, they had a very good start, which maybe changed that. But they have a tough loss tonight to Colorado. I think the final ended up being 5-2. They had a 2-1 lead going into the third in this one and kind of just blew it. So we'll see, what their situation is. Again, I don't think the expectation was that this team was going to make the playoffs and make a deep run. Playoffs, maybe, but I just don't think they're quite built for that. They have a relatively young core that's still building. They have the Parise and Suter contracts that are still on the books through the end of this season. So next year will really be the year we see what Bill Guerin can do with this team. He's going to have a lot more room to make moves. But yeah, for now, they're still in a playoff spot, which is the most important thing. I think the goal for them is still to get in and see what happens, as it is for most of these playoff teams. But yeah, for now, Minnesota, again, another 5-5 team, just kind of coasting along. Number 10, the team that, lost to the Stars tonight, my bad. The LA Kings, they're 5-3-2 in their last 10. Very weird team. They're not even really streaky. They just are inconsistent, but good enough at it that they find themselves in this spot. The games that they're on, they actually look really, really good. But the games they're not on, they just look like they're kind of going through the motions, and that was kind of the case tonight against the Stars. Obviously, the Stars not yet on the board, and they're a very good team this year, but it's kind of the case in every game that they look like that. I mean, the Kings have the talent on paper. Darcy Kemper has been a surprisingly good story this year for them, which was going to be a potential case with the way that the Kings defend going into the year, and that's obviously shown itself. But yeah, I mean, the games that they don't look all that interested, it really, really shows. And the games that they look like they showed up to win, it does really show. I think this team has the ability to be a top 8 team for sure. But they just have to kind of like push themselves into that mode, because again, they definitely have games where they just look like they're going through the motions. Tonight was one of those against Dallas, and yeah, I think they just kind of have to put it all together. This is another team that doesn't have a ton of rumors going around it heading into the deadline, but I'll be very curious to see what moves, if any, they end up making. And then number 9, the last team in this row, the actual team that beat Minnesota tonight, the Colorado Avalanche, 6-4 in their last 10. Kind of similar story to Los Angeles, to be honest. Some nights they look like world beaters, and other nights it just doesn't look like that's the case. I think this team, more than in the last handful of years for them, really, really struggles with depth. And now it's both defensively and up front. I think they're still probably looking for another center to add, and I think they could really use one more good defenseman just to really square up this roster. And I think Mackenzie Blackwood has faded a little bit in his performances since coming over from San Jose. He's still been good for them, but some of those crazy performances have just not been there of late. So the Avs are still fine. I don't think they're the juggernauts that they once were, when it was McKinnon and Rantanen really clicking on all cylinders, and they had, a little more depth up front. I don't know if that's going to change over the next week. We'll see, but for now, still pretty comfortably in the playoff spot at number 9 here. Number 8, the Carolina Hurricanes. This is a weird one. I really couldn't tell where to place this team. They have an interesting situation, obviously, with Mikko Rantanen, whether they keep him or not. It was a surprising trade when it happened. It's even more surprising that there's still consideration that they might move him. This team on paper, it's still so good. They have Freddie Anderson, who when healthy is probably a top 10, top 15 goalie in the league. They have a very capable backup. They have a very strong group of defensemen, and their forward group is the same kind of like level of talent that Rod Brindamore wants to be able to utilize for his teams. And I think they have all the ability in the world to make noise in the playoffs. So I would be shocked to see them move Rantanen. But there's just so much discussion about it, and the way that this management group operates, I can't say I'd be surprised by it, but it would still be a shocking move, if that makes sense. So the Canes haven't looked great since the Rantanen trade. All that being said, I think it makes more sense for them to keep him, see if they can sign him the extension. If they can, great. If not, you go with him into the playoffs and you put your absolute best foot forward and try to win a cup, because again, this team on paper, there's no reason they don't have the ability to do that and square up really against any other team in the East and have a pretty good fight. So we'll see what happens with the Canes for now, just in that top row at number 8. Number 7, the Vegas Golden Knights, 5-3-2 in their last 10. A lot of people are very, very confident in this team heading into the playoffs, and I don't know that I share that same sentiment toward them. I don't love a couple things, really. One, I think their wing strength, like, it's outperformed what I thought at least it was going to be coming into the season. but still just not quite enough. And there's not really a ton of names out there that they can add to give themselves more offensive firepower that are like big difference makers, right? Unless they do the most Vegas Golden Knights thing ever and swing and get Mikko Rantanen, right? And then the goaltending, maybe this is just me. Like, I don't know. I don't trust Aiden Hill. And I certainly don't trust Ilya Samsonov. I know he's won a cup, Hill, of course. But seeing the way he plays, there's certain nights he's absolutely on it. Don't get me wrong. But there's plenty of nights, too, where he kind of reminds me of Robin Lehner a little bit. The more chaotic version of Lehner that was kind of like floating around his crease, sliding all over the place, not super confident in his footing. Yeah, Vegas has still been fine. Again, 5-3-2 in their last 10, pretty close to the top of the division. They're okay here at number 7 for me. Number 6, this team has been red hot, and that is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Their schedule hasn't been the craziest lately, but you have to win the games that are in front of you, and they have absolutely done that again. 8-1-1. Vasilevsky has absolutely torched the league since really the turn of the calendar year, but especially like his last 15 or so games. I think he's above a 920 and is like 10-3-2 or something like that, like something ridiculous. He's been great, which obviously they need with the slightly less scoring power than they've had in previous years. And frankly, the defense is a little bit worse too. So if Vasi's healthy and on his game, especially heading into the playoffs where he's known to be just a monster, that's great news for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Number 5, the other Florida team, the Florida Panthers, of course, 7-3-0 in their last 10. Good to see both Spencer Knight, and really Spencer Knight has kind of been better statistically than Bobrovsky for most of the year. But if those two guys can stay healthy and stay consistent heading into the playoffs, this team has one of the better tandems if they need to go that route, which most teams do at some point in the playoffs at this point. And really it's just a matter of staying healthy and seeing what additions they're going to make. They're doing enough, obviously, to stay amongst the division leaders, amongst the leaders in the Eastern Conference. And we'll see if they are able to add enough firepower to make a good push. Even if they don't, I still think they're probably bound for a pretty deep playoff run. And number 4, the penultimate Eastern Conference team here, their division rivals, the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs, you guys have heard it all year, I'm sure. The goaltending is supposed to be better than it's been in, maybe decades at this point. I mean, Stolarz, since coming back, has looked pretty good. Joseph Woll has looked really good all season. Yeah, it's at this point, it's just a matter of getting to the playoffs and see what they can do. If they lose out in the first round again, it's the Leafs. I can't say I'd be surprised, but yeah, at this point, they're happy. As long as they're in these top 2 rows and they make it into the playoffs, which I would be absolutely astounded if they didn't, they're fine. So Leafs at 4, they've been playing very well lately. A good win tonight against the New York Rangers. We'll keep them here at number 4. Number 3, another team that won tonight, the Dallas Stars. This team is just really clicking on all cylinders, right? Even without Miro Heiskanen, which is making it that much more impressive. Arguably their most important player, and they are still winning games really without too much of a hiccup, which is, again, just very, very impressive. I will be very interested to see what moves they make at the deadline here. I think it makes a lot of sense for them to add a defenseman given what their bottom 4 looks like, and the fact that they have the space there without Heiskanen right now. So a guy like Seth Jones is a name that's been kind of rumored there, and I think that makes a lot of sense for them. I know Elliot Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast spit out Erik Karlsson. I don't love that one nearly as much, but we'll definitely see some more rumors between now and next Friday on defensemen that might end up in Dallas, and I think they'll probably end up making at least one of those moves, maybe another move up front as well to kind of shelter Logan Stankoven. Yeah, we'll see. Regardless, this team's been very, very good. Number 2, my guys, the Washington Capitals, a little bit slower of late, 5-2-3, but still clicking along. As long as the goaltending doesn't fall off a cliff, this team should be okay heading into the playoffs. As high as they are of a seed, I still don't love what they're going to be able to do depending on who their matchup is. If they get a team like Detroit or Columbus, I don't hate their odds. If they end up falling down and get a team like Carolina or New Jersey, I'm not as big of a fan. So we'll see what happens with Washington. But for now, as far as things have gone lately, they've still been good enough to deserve to keep this spot, I think, at number 2. And then number 1, to no one's surprise, they did have their winning streak snapped, but it's the Winnipeg Jets. This team has been fantastic all year. They, again, 11-game winning streak. It gets snapped by Nashville of all teams, which is just poetic. But yeah, they've been fantastic. They're a probable lock for the division win here. I mean, Dallas would have to go on a hell of a run, and they would have to slow down quite a bit, and I just don't see that happening, especially the way Connor Hellebuck's been playing. So yeah, again, like the Leafs, this is a matter of what are they going to do when they get to the playoffs. We'll, like Dallas, be very curious to see what moves they make. They've made moves in the past that just haven't really panned out, so we'll see if they try that again, and if they don't, what kind of success they have with the team that they've got in place now. So yeah, that is it for the power rankings. Again, I'm going to try to stay on pace with these every week now that I've gotten it started, and now we'll be able to track movement now that I have a baseline to work with. So let me know what you guys think in the comments section down below. Who do I have ranked too high, too low? Who's going to move a lot next week? And what do you think the trade deadline is going to do to impact the way this board's laid out now? So thanks again for watching. Hope you guys enjoy the Stadium Series tomorrow, and we will catch you in the next one.